Welcome, everybody. This is our last session of basically the very first Conchas y Café zine to be completed entirely digitally, thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. So here we are. Volume 6, issue number 1. I still haven't decided on the title yet, but thank you to those of you that have been submitting your title suggestions. Cada una de sus sugerencias me ha parecido muy buena y también sus sugerencias para el tema, para el nuevo zine. So the new series that will be starting in November for basically issue number 2. I haven't quite decided yet on the theme, but your suggestions are definitely getting my mind going, and I think that we're going to have some good stuff again. Based on the work that I've seen so far and in putting together the issue number 1 zine, a lot of you have been really writing from a place of what it's been like to exist on this planet for the past 6 months or so with our COVID-19 friend. And I think that's like I said before, really good because we're documenting, the experience of us as artists. So I definitely congratulate you guys on being a part of history in the making. Did anybody have any questions about our lesson from last week about, publishing and things to consider when you start to prepare your manuscript? Cualquier pregunta que tengan sobre eso, aquí estoy dispuesto para pues darles mis observaciones, mis sugerencias, mis tips de cómo hacer un libro. Do you have any questions? Miss Lois, you're on mute if you don't mind unmuting yourself there. Nettie, do you have questions?
Based on your experience, how it's like to design a cover? How's the process so far?
Well, designing a cover really comes down to some basic design principles. You don't want your cover to be too busy. You want your cover to be something that really draws attention and that speaks to the content of your book. You could do a lot of different types of things, like even just a handmade cover, like a handmade collage, or if you want to do just a photo and the title and your name. It really it's gonna come down to what you can imagine is gonna give people a sense of what they're about to experience by picking up your book. But definitely, consider doing something that is simple and striking. Those would be my main things.
Simple and striking, I like it.
Yeah, it really should call people's attention, because whether we like it or not, even though the saying is don't judge a book by its cover, we definitely do judge books by their covers. We'll pick it up because of the cover first before anything else.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mauricio in the chat asked, what sort of marketing strategies have I used to get our zines across out there? My main thing in selling the zines that I've made, as well as the ones through Conchas y Café and Art Block and all of them, it's really actually been doing kind of the footwork and taking them to bookstores. Independent bookstores usually will sell them for us, with a small percentage going to the bookstore, but also doing zine fests and being a part of that community has really helped us as an organization, as DSTL Arts, sell zines. Obviously, there's other things too that can be done that include using social media, Twitter, especially for literary work, and Instagram for visual art and visual work. Those two would be probably the best ones. Other strategies that I've seen be effective is Pinterest. And, as a social media platform, Pinterest can be more on the visual side, but as far as using that as a way to promote, like, say, a blog, especially as a writer. If you maintain a blog as a place where people can go and see your work on a more static and regular basis, that's a good way to promote your work. It also helps too for photographers and visual artists to have something like Tumblr or a blog specifically. Good question. Any other questions? Good, yeah. Pinterest isn't for everybody. As Mauricio pointed out, he never thought of it, but Pinterest can work, especially if you're doing artwork that is, I want to say, more on the children's book side or comic book work. That type of stuff definitely does have a pretty big following on Pinterest. Photography too, to a certain degree. Photography, obviously, Instagram is more the platform. There's a lot of other photo sharing sites, but Instagram is the one that everybody uses, at least right now. Facebook is not that effective anymore, but Facebook is a way to promote events, as a way to get donations and to connect to a web store. Facebook is a little bit more on the business friendly side if you have a business page. So any other questions before I get into how to create a budget?
Yeah, another question. What's your experience so far with Instagram and DSTL Arts?
Well, DSTL Arts is unique because of it being a nonprofit. So as a nonprofit organization, all the social media is really more about promoting the programs and kind of getting the message of DSTL Arts out there, not so much in selling. It starts to sort of confuse people, I've noticed, when I try to promote, hey, visit our web store and, promote us that way. But Facebook does help a little bit more with the selling of work. So Facebook is a good tool in that way. But it's also good to use other platforms like Twitter for mostly literary things. So those would be really good social media sites for marketing, especially books. Books about like poetry and fiction, that type of thing. Again, though, if you're talking about comic books, anything that's visual art, Instagram is probably going to be the better way. But they all kind of work together. So keep in mind, it's all like a network of marketing. It's a full-on plan. So yeah. Mauricio is asking, any books or literature to learn more about marketing through Twitter? Yeah, you could Google that. You've heard the same for poets, that Twitter is great for it. Yeah. I mean, Twitter is really more about literature, because it's more about words. That's where, authors have always kind of gone. But there are other resources out there for actually taking trainings on building a marketing strategy. There's one organization that's based out of Long Beach called the Nonprofit Partnership, and they actually have a professional development thing, a training for marketing that is happening, I believe, in November. So if you check them out, and I'll link them in our Google class, where you can sign up. But the nonprofit is called the Nonprofit Partnership, and they focus on doing trainings for nonprofits specifically, but this marketing strategies, marketing 101, workshop is it is a virtual workshop, so you don't have to go anywhere. You can just participate online. And if you actually sign up for it, there's also another nonprofit organization called the Center for Cultural Innovation that will actually reimburse you the cost of the workshop. You just have to apply for the scholarship. Like I said, I'll link those two in the Google class, so that way you guys can have the information as well. So, good questions. Yeah, when it comes to marketing, it's good to really think about the questions that I mentioned in the last session about, who is your audience? Where do they go? If you're talking about a book that's a children's book, you know, it's good to understand that children's books, authors, obviously all authors exist on Twitter in one form or another. But like I said earlier, children's books might be more of the Pinterest crowd because there's a lot of teachers and there's a lot of, you know, sort of like children oriented art and people that work more in childcare industries and education on Pinterest. So, those are the people that you want to get your book in front of. If you're talking about poetry, depending on the kind of poetry that you write, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, so there's different ways in which you can interact with your audience. If you're writing science fiction books, and you have artwork that goes with it, it might be more of a like Tumblr or Reddit type of thing, so it really depends on your audience. Who is your audience? Mauricio is asking, how would you promote a blog besides your own personal social media accounts? Blogging is one of those things where, yes, your social media accounts are going to be very important and a big part of your promotion, but when it comes to blogs, the thing about blogging is that there's the concept of reblogging. So if you share your links through, say, like a newsletter with other people that follow your blog or with other people whose blogs are similar to your blog, you can always share work that way. And kind of like it's sort of like a retweet in Twitter. You can have people reblog your work. You can use it also as kind of like your official website too. So, anytime that you post something, like say a little snippet of your blog post, on Twitter, you can always get people to come back to the full blog so that they can read that and more. That's always a good strategy. Nettie is asking, are there resources only available in Southern California, the workshop and reimbursement? Well, I'm only limited to what I know. So, here in LA County and basically all of Southern California and the state of California, we have the Center for Cultural Innovation. And then the nonprofit partnership is based in Long Beach, and so they serve LA County mostly. But because everything is all, online, at least right now, you can take advantage of that. Internationally, you could probably also take advantage of other platforms like lynda.com or Skillshare, which are websites that have other kinds of workshops and things that you can take that are more like a membership based thing. So you pay an annual membership fee, and then you can take all of the workshops that you want, whether that be for marketing, writing, all of that stuff. Skillshare in particular, I like because Skillshare supports artists. And one day, if you want to create a class on Skillshare, you'll be able to get paid for it. So the more people take your class on Skillshare, the more they pay you, a small percentage of the fees. And Masterclass, as Mauricio also put in the chat, Masterclass also has marketing classes too. So there's a lot of different online resources out there. Also, you might want to consider going to your local small business administration office. Basically, because you're an artist, you're going to be establishing yourself as a business. And so most small business development centers will actually offer these types of workshops for any kind of business. And because as an artist, you are a business owner, you can qualify for that. Sometimes they're free. And, sometimes they're very low cost, which is the nice thing about, the small business development centers. Here in LA County, there's one in off of Wilshire. And then there's one in the South Bay too. I don't know exactly where. I think it's in San Pedro. But here in LA, we have it in the over by Pico Union, Koreatown. Yeah, Nettie's familiar with Skillshare. Yeah, they pay a royalty, to those people that upload a class. So it's a good resource for sure. All right. So, any last questions that anybody has before we start to talk about how to finance your projects? Y si necesitan que traduzca, por favor, déjenme saber. All right. Well, if nobody has any questions, we'll continue on. So, like I had said before, a lot of the things that you have to consider before you get started with developing your manuscript is, who's your audience, and, what are the types of formats of your zine or your book that you want to go with. And ultimately, everything costs money. So it's good to, I think, understand that if you plan ahead and you know how much money you want to earn, and you know how much money you have available to you for creating your books or your comics or your photography albums, all of those things, they do help to have that information in advance, especially if you're going to be actually applying to grants and scholarships and artist residencies. And maybe you're going to also teach a workshop and you're going to use part of the money to pay for your project. All of those things are really, really useful tools and information for you to have when you're trying to get people to fund you. And so I shared with you all through Google Classroom what you're hopefully seeing on your screen right now, which is a spreadsheet that I created using Google Docs, Google Sheets, actually. And this right here has all of the information that you would possibly need to think about. Now, if you notice here, right, under annual cost, this is where you'll be able to actually input your information that you want. Because I shared it with you, each of you should be getting your own individual copy of this on Google Sheets. So in your Google Drive, you'll be able to access this all the time and make modifications. I suggest that you make a copy of it so that you can play with it. But if you go under monthly and weekly, you'll see in the formula section that I already input the formulas for you. And so you're probably not going to need to ever change these unless if it comes down to things like, Social Security, Medicare, unemployment tax, and worker compensation. Those you'll change based on, any changes in future tax laws. But first and foremost, I always say it's really important to pay yourself. And the truth be told, when it comes to Distill Arts, I didn't always pay myself first. It's only been actually the past 2 years now that I've actually I'm paying myself to operate Distill Arts. And, I've been very fortunate to get the money to be able to do that now. And when I do my grant applications for Distill Arts, I usually actually do a higher amount under salary. But $50,000 a year is a pretty average salary for a person that wants to live here in LA County on their own and not necessarily be struggling too much. Como ven aquí en la sección de las notas, 50,000 al año es equivalente a ganar $24 la hora en un trabajo de 40 horas a la semana. Um, in the lower sections of this spreadsheet, you'll actually see that there's a different way that I calculated income, but if you're basically pushing for at least $50,000 a year, which I think is the bare minimum that you should be asking for, just keep in mind that that's equivalent to $24 an hour if you're working a 40-hour week as an artist. Benefits, is very important, obviously, especially right now because of the pandemic and even beyond. Just make sure you take care of your health. If you don't take care of your health and you're not prepared to, you're really putting your ability to create your artwork at risk. And so do think about that. Consider it. And in my experience, $500 a month is the average medical insurance premium that will cover very basic needs for most people. So that's why here I put in $6,000 a year. Now, these sections about Social Security, Medicare, the California unemployment tax, and workers' compensation, those only matter if you're paying yourself as an employee of your organization. Remember what I was saying? You're a business owner. And as a business owner, you have a choice of either actually fully incorporating. So that means going with the IRS and saying, hey, I'm acting as a corporation. I'm paying taxes on everything that I earn. The $50,000, that's listed on here, you got to keep in mind that is going to be taxed. So in the end, you may not be bringing home the $50,000 a year. You're going to be bringing home maybe more like $45,000 a year, $43,000 a year. And you're then going to file your taxes. So as a business owner, you're getting taxed basically twice. The number that you see here for Social Security, Medicare, the unemployment tax, and workers' compensation, this is actually what you pay as a payroll user. So if you do pay yourself and you're generating a W-2 at the end of the year, and you're paying taxes from the $50,000, that means that the $50,000 in taxes that you're paying, that's separate from this amount. This amount is what, as an employer, you're also paying to the IRS, and that's paying for other people's Social Security and for other people's unemployment. It's just kind of a way for us to redistribute the wealth here, at least in the United States. So there's a way around that if you don't want to pay those taxes, those payroll taxes, and that would mean turning yourself into an independent contractor. And then you are using this spreadsheet not so much to put a salary here, instead you're putting it in the independent contractor section. And then everything else, all of the other business expenses that follow this section, are the things that you're keeping track of with receipts, so that way you can say, this is how much money I earned, and then this is how much money was spent on business expenses that the IRS will then use to reduce your taxes, if you even have to pay taxes at all. So if you're the type of person that would rather get a tax return at the end of the year, then make yourself an employee and also an employer. So you're the business owner and you're also the employee of your business. That way you're paying taxes and you don't have to worry about having to come up with a large amount of money at the very end of the year, because you haven't been paying taxes throughout the year. In the spreadsheet here, I also included an assistant salary. So if you are able to and would want to, and you do incorporate as a business, you can include an assistant, like an aide or whatever you want to call them, in your calculations for your salaries. So An independent contractor is different from an employee. An independent contractor, according to the state of California specifically, is a person that does a job that is specialized and is not a job that any other employee in your organization would normally do. So like me as a teaching artist and the executive director of DSTL Arts, I still hire independent contractors in the form of teaching artists because it's a limited amount of time that I'm hiring them, and they're teaching things that maybe I might not be able to teach myself, even though I'm maybe helping in the teaching part of it. So an independent contractor is just a way for me to not have to pay extra payroll taxes, and also ensure that they get the most amount of money when they need it, as they need it. The thing about having an independent contractor is that you do have to report them to the IRS still, even if you're, sort of doing it as like an as needed basis. But the independent contractor is going to be a person that you'll kind of use on a temporary basis. And you'll have to report them. And at the end of the year, it is a 1099 tax form that you create for them. And so you still are reporting that you paid a wage to someone, and then they're able to then use that to pay taxes themselves. So here in this section, the upper section of this budget, it has, like I said already, the calculation for you. So even if a person is, say, going for a $50,000 a year salary, with all of the payroll taxes plus the benefits, in the end, this administrative staff total is what you'll see. Then the independent contractor, if you pay an independent contractor, their total will come up here. And so your entire staffing cost will be this amount, this $66,575 a year. So like I said, even if you're in a grant applying so that you can pay yourself $50,000 a year, keep in mind that it's not just $50,000 a year because of taxes. Those, that extra amount that you have to set aside for taxes are going to be something that you can actually request in a grant application, or for your own purposes when you're planning your projects. Now, the next section, this operational overhead, these are really important things to think about, especially if you're going to be doing a workshop, or if you have to go to use someone else's studio space or something like that, and you don't want to find yourself in trouble if there's an accident. So general liability insurance is really important. Every year, DSTL Arts pays about $1,350 in general liability insurance. And so if in case, somebody gets hurt during a workshop, I don't have to worry about, the organization having to pay for those medical expenses. The general liability insurance will help me pay for that. I'll just pay, just like in a car, car insurance, you pay your deductible. So general liability insurance is the same thing. It just helps protect any kind of accidents that might happen. Now, if you're doing a program that involves volunteers, you might want to get volunteer insurance. That's something that is relatively cheap. It's usually only like about $100 a year, depending on the kind of volunteers that you're going to be using. But for most workshops that are arts workshops, if you're not working with children, you're working with the general population, that means kids and their parents, then your volunteer insurance will probably be lower, and you might not need it for very, very often. The same goes with special events insurance. So let's say you're a poet, and you're organizing a reading that's out in the public, and it's a one-time event. You might want to get special event insurance. So that way you don't have to pay the general liability insurance that you would pay for a whole year. You could do it for just one day, for a certain amount of hours, and you have your insurance to cover any kind of accidents that happens during your event. That's something that you can always request for funding. The same goes with event permits. if you want to do an event in a park, a public park, it usually is operated by the city. And so you'd have to go get a permit from the city, or some sort of vendor's license, if you're going to be selling. And you can incorporate that into your expenses. So that way you're not, basically chipping away at your budget for your actual project, for your artwork. And keep in mind, a lot of these things, this operational overhead, are the things that are also tax deductible too. So, keep your receipts. They're things that you can always say to the IRS at the end of the year, this is what I spent in operating my business as an artist. So don't tax me as much as you might normally. That's where also things like your rent can come in. When it comes to rent, you can actually deduct a percentage of your rent or your mortgage if you're using a home studio. So let's say it's your living room is part of your studio. That's where you do a lot of your work. Well, however big of a square footage that area is, that's a percentage of the whole. If you live in a studio apartment, 100% of your studio apartment is going to be your studio, your workspace. So 100% of your rent you'd be able to deduct. If you live in a one-bedroom apartment, and you're using, say, the kitchen, whatever that square footage of your kitchen is, you can deduct that as part of your rent, being for your home office. Also, keep in mind, I'm not a tax person, so I'm not an accountant. There's some of the information I'm giving you might be limited to the area that you live in, to your individual tax situation. So if you need to ask questions, ask an actual tax professional. The way that I do my taxes, I'm keeping track of all of these things, and thanks to H&R Block and the way that they do their online tax reporting service, it actually makes it pretty easy to understand some of these things, and what is allowed and what's not allowed. If you do pay for custodial service, that's also something that you can include in your expenses. Some funders consider that to be an operational overhead, so you might as well ask for that money. Utilities, obviously, things like your gas, electricity, the water, all of those things are part of your home office studio. So those things you can actually deduct. And you can also charge as part of your grant application or your proposal for, completing a project. The same goes for your phone and internet service. So especially if you have to go somewhere, if you're traveling, like at a hotel room, and you have to pay extra for the internet, that's something that you can definitely account for in your project budget. I like to have the general office supplies as part of the operational overhead. You can do things like staplers, printer paper, ink for your printer, even a printer itself. If you have to buy a printer, you want to obviously include that as part of your project budget. The same goes, especially if you're thinking long-term, right? If you're going to be an artist that's working like this for a very long time, for the rest of your career, you may want to also start to build in a savings fund. And so a tech repair or replacement fund is probably a good thing to have. I know I try to keep a certain amount of money in the DSTL Arts budget so that I can replace a laptop if I need to, or if I need to replace a printer, which I have to now actually replace one. So, those kinds of things, if I have the money for it and I plan for it, it's going to be there for me when I need it. Also consider things like professional development. If you are trying to, write a book about marketing, right, as an artist, well, you might need to take a marketing class to understand some of the basic terms. And so if you have to pay for it, that's something that you can always build into a budget and, ask for the funding to pay for it. The same goes for traveling, your gas mileage and parking. If you have to travel to your meetings, or if you have to go to, even that training, Your gas mileage is something that you can keep track of, and that is something that you can then ask for reimbursement, whether that be from a grant, from the IRS when you do your taxes, all of that stuff. Postal service, keep in mind, some people don't like to use their home address as their address. So if you rent a PO box to send off, supplies for your workshops or, things like that, the shipping, the cost of stamps, the PO box rental, all those are all things that you can include in the budget. These, especially if you're going to be creating a book, something that you publish, or if you're going to be putting on a production where it involves using other people's music and that kind of thing, or if you're even going to buy, say, a photograph through stock photography, that you're going to use in your book, you want to pay those licensing fees, because the worst thing that can happen is you put it out there, you publish it, and then the person that created the artwork originally finds out, and they sue you. So avoid that. Pay the licensing fees. Build that into your project budget. If you need to consult with a lawyer or get some sort of legal counsel, you can also build that into your budget. If you're talking about actually incorporating as a business, or creating your own nonprofit, there's other organizations out there that can help you with that, including the Public Council. They're the ones that helped me incorporate DSTL Arts, and so and it was free. They actually are a community-based organization that at least to help form a nonprofit, they'll help you do it for free. But if that's not necessarily the route that you want to take, and you want to start in a full-blown business, you may want to consult with either the Small Business Development Center, so that they can help you. But even with the incorporation paperwork, the IRS does charge a fee. And so does the state of California to start any kind of business. So build that into your budget. The copyright registration fees, we have talked about copywriting before. Depending on what you're copywriting, there is a fee, and it's on a scale. So if you're doing a book, it's anywhere between $25 to like $50 to register the copyright for a single book. So keep that in mind. If that's a part of your project, build that into your budget. If you want to pay for an accountant, you can build that into your budget as well. A payroll service provider is going to really, really help you if you're going to have employees, or if you're going to consider yourself an employee. That's why I really love Square. And I highly recommend Square, because for me, they have been there from the very beginning when I started DSTL Arts. They first started off as being the tool that I use to sell stuff online and in person, and to take credit card transactions. But now they're also my payroll service provider. And they are the ones that help me file all the tax paperwork when it comes to that time for my employees. So do consider that, especially if you're going to have independent contractors or other staff working under you. Bank accounts, they usually charge some sort of service fee, whether that be for you to do wire transfers, or to say like cancel a check, or even just to maintain a business account, and you have to keep a certain amount of money in the bank account, they'll charge fees. So do build that into your budget. Always just plan ahead for that. When it comes to sales tax, that's also especially important if you're going to be selling stuff. If you are going to take on the responsibility of selling your zines and chapbooks and things like that, or any kind of other merchandise, you do have to pay sales tax in the state of California, and it's going to vary based on where you are. I know that the city of LA's sales tax is 9.75, where the sales tax in, I think, Compton, for example, is 10%. So they add on an additional 0.25% to their sales tax. So does the city of Alhambra, and I believe Pasadena too. So every city is different. So you need to really check where you are and make sure you're collecting the correct amount of sales tax when you're selling things. Because you guys were all talking about or asking questions about marketing, these are some of the different ways in which you can prepare for that, right? So building a website is going to be really important, especially if you're going to use it as a blog, as a way to capture people's emails, as a way to sell things. All of those things are really important. So if you do decide to pay somebody to design your website, build that into your marketing costs. Also, the maintenance of it. So if you need to work with a graphic designer on a regular basis to make changes, you want to build that into your program budget or your project budget. Also, simple things like paying for the URL. The distillarts.org URL, the web address, is something that I have to pay for. It only costs like $12 a year. But in order for me to be able to use it on the website, I have to pay an additional fee to the web host. So the website that hosts the distillarts.org website, they're the ones that charge me an extra. I think it's $35 a year. So it's $35 plus the $12 a year. It's never just the one single thing. So do keep that in mind. And that's something that you pay every year. So if you know that that's an annual cost, just keep that in your budget every year. Business cards in the day of COVID probably aren't necessarily the best things to have, but in the future, that's a kind of a marketing tool that's tried and true. So consider paying for business cards. Flyers and postcards, if you're going to be using that to promote your workshops, to promote your reading, if you're doing an exhibit, a photo exhibit, or an art show, flyers and postcards are definitely going to be a part of getting the word out there, just as much as social media promotion. So, build a budget. $20 can actually go a pretty long way for a single event on Facebook. You can make it last for up to a month. You can do a week so that it's always constantly active. And there's a lot of different tools out there for doing social media promotion, but paid posts are there for a reason. So take advantage of them and build it into your budget again. Like I was saying earlier, for Distill Arts to sell the zines and books that I produce, I actually normally in a regular year attend up to like about 10 different zine fests and events. Some of them are not that expensive. Zine fests can be as cheap as like $20 up to $150 to participate in. For last year, when we participated in the LA Times Festival of Books, and for this year, even though it didn't happen this year, I paid almost, I think it was $1,500 for the 2-day event. So, I built that into the Distill Arts budget. And, those are events where I actually really do sell a lot of our chapbooks and zines. And so it's just one of those big marketing tools that works for me and for Distill Arts. It may not work for everybody, but do build that into your budget if you think that that's something that you want to do. And also build into your budget supplies that you might need: water, snacks, tablecloths. If you're going to be creating a banner, if you are going to be, I don't know, buying special little furniture or a table even that you're going to take to your event, those are good things for you to build into your budget. Things like your gas, parking, even a car wash, those are all tax deductible. So even if you're not always going to be using your car for your project, if you're going to say take a day for inspiration to go write poetry at the beach, but you don't live near the beach, you know what? That's kind of your job. That's part of what you're doing. So, if you're using your car for your business as an artist, you can write off some of these things and get paid through grants to operate your vehicle. So, lease, if you have a lease or if you financed it, and you're making car payments, you can actually build that into your budget. Same thing with the auto insurance and the registration. Those are things that you can plan for. Every year or every 6 months, you're going to pay X amount for your insurance or for your registration. You might as well build that into a budget so more or less what you're spending your money on. Oil changes and gas or things that you can deduct. Do keep in mind that gas in particular there is a limit to how much you can deduct when it comes to doing your taxes, and that's only 75 cents for every mile. And that does change every now and then, but as far as I know, the current rate is 75 cents per mile. And just like with your technology, you want to build into your budget like a replacement fund for tires, brakes, spark plugs, doing regular tune-ups and that type of thing. You might as well build that into your budget too, so that way you can know in advance, how much money you need to continually save. Same for emergency repairs. I think that it's always really good to be prepared for those rainy days. Let's see, I'll get into the in-kind stuff right now. But before I do, does anybody have any questions so far? I know I covered a lot. So, cualquier pregunta, si necesitan que traduzca algo también, por favor, déjenme saber. Let's see.
If you go drinking with a client, does that count?
Believe it or not, yes, it does.
Yes.
Yeah, really. So if you go, to dinner, if you're meeting at a coffee shop and you buy a coffee, if you go to a bar and you're drinking with your client and you're talking business, whatever you spend is tax deductible. So when you go to do your taxes, do keep in mind that that is something that you can write off. Just keep a receipt and make sure that you put it in the correct place. Nettie in the chat put down, for the ones presenting work in Spanish, you can contact your local Centro Cultural de España. In the US, they're based in DC and Miami. They love to support the arts in the Spanish-speaking diaspora across the Americas. That is very true, and it's also true of the Mexican consulate, and also, I believe, the consulates of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Chile. I believe they're most active here in the US. Judith, I see your hand is up.
This is not a question, but it's just to let you know. I'm taking notes from my mom because my mom's in the class right now, but she didn't want to miss it. So I'm also taking notes.
Thank you. Well, if you do have any questions, though, let me know, okay? And
Thank
most of the stuff might actually be important for you too, little Judy, because you're gonna, eventually start working too. So knowing how to save money and budget is going to be, I think, a really useful tool for you too. So, yeah. ¿Alguna pregunta? ¿Alguna otra pregunta? Mauricio, yeah, it's called team building if it's with your coworkers or employees. If you think of hiring an assistant, that is correct. That would actually fall under your professional development budget. Team buildings.
I think it's complicated.
It can get complicated, but believe it or not, it's when it comes to doing your taxes, as long as you are thorough and you can justify any expenses that are related to you as an artist, you can still write it off. One important thing that I should say, though, is that you do need to show an income as an artist in order to be able to write off certain things. And so, if you have, like, say, $20,000 in, going out and drinking and eating, and you are making only $5,000 as an artist, there's the IRS is only going to take so much. So do keep those things in mind. But it'd be for a book deal. Yeah. If you have a book deal and you have that advance, you can technically use that advance as an expense for that. But again, remember, if that's all part of a grant application, you're getting a grant to do, say, like a work of translation. And maybe not so much the booze, right? But if you do go to a coffee shop, you can actually say, yeah, I'm doing work. And, this is an expense that I incurred while doing work. So, hopefully that does kind of help you a little bit. So any other questions before I talk about volunteers and in-kind donations? No? See, Mauricio is asking, how would you calculate tax on products like books or zines or chapbooks? Good question. So for that, I'm going to go back to the handout. So to calculate your taxes, I put in the notes here, right? You need to calculate your taxes based on the municipality that you are headquartered in. So if you live in Long Beach, for example, you live also in the state of California. So you can go to the California Board of Equalization website and you can type in your address and it'll tell you where, that particular like tax region is and how much you have to collect in sales tax. So it would be the 9.75% of the standard California sales tax. It's actually 9.5% standard California sales tax, plus the additional 0.25% that is, I believe, for the city of Long Beach. Like I said, if you live in an area like Alhambra or Compton, they round up. They actually have an additional sales tax that they collect. So go to the California Board of Equalization website and check to see how much sales tax you need to collect on each item. And it's per item. And also for services, if it's a service that results in a product, like say you're doing a translation, you can charge sales tax on your service as a translator. Food normally doesn't charge sales tax if it's like a prepared meal, but that also depends on the individual location and the type of food, like produce. Produce normally doesn't charge sales tax. It's things that are pre-packaged that you would charge sales tax. You can totally learn about that stuff by going to the Board of Equalization website, and you'll have a better understanding of it. If you are using a web-based like order system, like Square as an example, you can calculate, you can actually put into when you set up your account on Square, you can tell it, where you are. They'll automatically calculate your sales tax, and then you can set it up so that each individual item on every transaction does charge sales tax. So they're collecting the sales tax on your behalf, and then you have to take your part and then send it off to the state of California. So that way you're always current. You'll also have to pay sales tax to the city of LA if you live in the city of LA, or the city of Long Beach, or whichever city you live in. But very good question, Mauricio. Thank you for asking that. So let's go ahead and move on to in-kind donations. So there might come a time where you're, say, teaching a workshop and you need help and you have a volunteer. Or let's say you're going to a Zine Fest and you have an extra chair and you need somebody to help you with making sales that day. And it's just a friend or a loved one that cares about you and is there as a volunteer. Their time and specialty, whatever that might be, does have a value. And so for grant applications, especially if you're going to apply to a grant, you can say that you're getting an in-kind donation in the amount of X amount of money. And, the volunteer time, right? If they're a volunteer that's just there to help you sell, they don't have a special skill or anything, or there's no special skill required for selling, you can calculate the rate as, the minimum wage, which here for the city of LA, and I believe the whole county, it's $15 an hour, right? So for $15 an hour, if a person's there with you for 8 hours, they're giving you, they're volunteering and donating their time at $15 an hour for X amount of hours. Now, if it's a person that's, say, like a lawyer or a graphic designer, and they're giving you their time as a volunteer, their time is worth more because of it being a specialized skill. Graphic designers can charge anywhere between $50 to $100 an hour. A lawyer might charge between $250 to $500 an hour, or more. So depending on the level of skill, if it's a specialized skill, then you can calculate your in-kind donation as a higher amount. And that would be part of your budget. So that would be something that you report to your grantor, the person that gives you the grant. That would be something that you tell them, that this is how I matched, the money that they gave you. The same goes for a venue, right? So if it's like, say, at the library, and you're doing a program for the public, you're not charging the public to do a program. The city of LA's public library system, they charge $250 an hour, or I'm sorry, for 2 hours, right? So it's a $250 rental rate that they're giving you for free as a donation to you because you are doing a workshop in their library. If we're talking about the county, the LA County Library, they only charge $60 an hour, $60 for a 2-hour event. So if it's free, and open to the public, and you're doing it at the library, at the county library, it'll be $60 that you can say is being donated. But if you're in the city of LA, or in another city with their own library system, it could be more. But that is also a donation. And another way that you can say to your funder, hey, I'm matching the amount of money that you gave me with volunteers and people that believe in my project. So give me the money. Now, here's basically the nitty-gritty stuff that you'll probably have to consider when creating a budget. Your supplies, right? So here I have a number that's filled in. This right here is part of the formula, as you can see up in the formula box up here. So I wouldn't change that there. Change it in the part where that follows this. But your program or your project supplies can be anything that's very specifically for your project. So if it's a special kind of photo paper, if it's equipment that is specific to your project, like, say, buying a camera or buying a microphone so that you can start doing a vlog or a podcast, that would be part of your project supplies. And that's something that you would want to include in that particular section. The same goes with printing. So if you're buying a book, right? If you're printing a book, or if you're printing flyers that are very specific for this one-time project, or flyers that are for, say, the event, the culmination event, that could be something that you include here. But mostly, especially if you're doing a book, the printing costs are more for any kind of book. The same goes for a rental. So if you have to actually pay to rent a space, that's something that you would input here. This one I left blank because this one is one that you can put in on your own. But for the printing costs, the same as with the supplies, that's actually a different part of this spreadsheet. So I'll show you where to start adding that stuff in. But here at the bottom, you'll see your total project cost. So with a very minimal budget for just the staff salary and just the program supplies, as you can see here, it's already at $70,773.94. So, there's not a whole lot that's happening in this particular project, as it is right now. But keep in mind, right, this is going to be how much you are actually shooting to get from, say, a funder, or fundraising through Patreon, or through subscribers to your YouTube channel, or whatever the case might be. So keep all of those things in mind as you start developing your projects. Now, here I created for you all an itemization list. So here you can actually start to change things if you need it. So you can, change out the item, such as ink for your inkjet printer. If you know that it costs that amount right there, and you are going to be changing your ink up to 3 times a year, you just change these numbers here, right? The cost, the amount of times you need it per year. And right here, the total cost is going to automatically change for you. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say it's $100, and I'm doing it 5 times a year. As you can see here, it's already changed for you to $500. So, feel free to play with that as you need it, and try to be as thorough as you can be in thinking about what kind of supplies you need. All the supplies that are listed here right now are actually the supplies that when I create my budgets for DSTL Arts, I'm normally accounting for them. So printer, ink, sketchbooks, tracing paper, linoleum blocks and printing paper for block printing. In the past when I was doing these things in person with my illustration mentees, these were the things that I was accounting for. And those are the actual amounts that I would actually spend throughout the year. So, these are all different types of tools that you might use if you're a visual artist. If you're a photographer, you're probably going to be using photo paper a lot. So, here are a couple of different types that I would recommend using that are relatively inexpensive, but still of a decent quality. If you have a photo printer, which is more specialized than a regular inkjet printer, those inks tend to cost more, so that's why that's there. If you're putting on a show, an art show, and you need to frame your work, obviously that's going to be something that you want to put into your budget. Same thing if you need easels or display stands for going to an event. That's something that you'll put in there. These for the button maker, those are the actual costs of the button maker that I use when I do actually bring the button maker to workshops. So the button maker set, the whole thing that I have, it's an industrial grade one, it's a professional one, and the button maker as well as the die cutter as a combination pack cost me $500 when I bought it. It was a one-time expense. I probably will never have to buy another one again. But that's something that I built into the budget for DSTL Arts several years ago. Of course, if you're going to have a button maker, you're going to need the supplies too. So I have here the supplies and things like that, plus the shipping. Shipping is something that you may not always think about, but you can include that as part of your project budget if you're ordering things online. So do build that into your budget. Know that it's never going to be just the cost of the item. It's the cost of the item plus taxes plus shipping. So build it into your budget. As far as printing goes, before I move on, this amount right here, the $2609.94, that right there is going to automatically populate. So it automatically does the math for you if you're using this same spreadsheet. And it's going to appear right here under this particular section. So that way you don't have to mess with any of the formulas that I already built into this budget template for you. The same goes for the printing costs, right? So now before I had mentioned before that an individual ISBN number, so one single ISBN number, costs $125. Now, if you buy the pack of 10, it's going to be $295. So, there's a big savings there. And especially if you're going to be producing a book. If you are producing a book or a zine or a chapbook, the one single ISBN number works for the physical thing. But if you're also going to be doing an ebook on top of your physical book, that's a separate ISBN number. And so your ebook is going to need an ISBN number. Your physical book is going to need an ISBN number. And also, if you decide to do an audiobook where you're recording yourself performing it, that audiobook also needs an ISBN number. So that's already 3 ISBN numbers that if you buy the pack of 10, you are saving a pretty decent chunk of money. So I would recommend, if you're going to actually publish something, get yourself the pack of 10 at the bare minimum. You can save even more money if you buy the larger packs, but you can always start there. And these are estimates that I normally put into my budgets when it comes to printing our chapbooks and zines. A chapbook that's got about 50 color pages through Blurb, the printing provider that I use, the print on demand provider. This is more or less what they charge. So it's about $4.49 for a single chapbook. And if I'm printing 100, I know that they'll give me a discount on that actual number. But build it into your budget as you need it. Same goes for the shipping. So do keep that in mind. Most of the time, especially if you're shipping things through the post office, and you're using what's called media mail. Media mail will cost you about $2.80 for every book that you ship, depending on the size and weight of the book, and also depending a little bit on how far away you're sending it. If it's an international order, the cost of shipping can be a lot higher. But if it's within the United States, including Hawaii, Alaska, and any of the territories, it's usually only $2.80 to ship a single book. So that's more or less where the shipping costs are coming from there. For the photo art books through Blurb, it's about $3 per book, depending on the number of pages. If you go with the minimum number of 24, that's about how much you will get charged, which is about how many pages that a children's book typically has too. Same thing there with the shipping. Other printing things that you might consider in the future would be things like stickers or pins, patches. There's a lot of online providers out there that do provide those services at a decent rate. And they're just cool swag. Merchandising is a way to make a little bit of extra money from your project. So you might as well build that into your budget. Same thing with screen printing services. You might decide that your book is worth, the cover is worth creating a t-shirt out of it, or a tote bag, or a small face mask, now that we're doing face masks. All of those things are printing services that you could take advantage of. Obviously want to include the shipping too. Now, all of those things, they cost money. And you might be asking yourself, well, how do I know what I need to ask for and from where? Here, I also created for you a projections, so a revenue projection template. Here you can actually play around with how much you might want to charge if you're going to teach a class, right? If your teaching artist rate is $50 an hour, and you end up working 960 hours, that means that is the same as earning $48,000 just by teaching a workshop. And that would be teaching workshops, as I put here in the notes, at 20 hours a week for 48 weeks out of the year. So that's basically part-time, working part-time, for another arts organization or for a couple, because you're more than likely going to work for at least 2 or 3. So if you know that that's how much money you're going to be charging, you'll already know working part-time, you'll be earning almost the full $50,000 that you had projected before. But of course, you're obviously not going to be doing just teaching if that's part of your project. You might also be a translator. And so if you're translating work for hire, or if you're licensing your artwork to other people, you can build that into your budget here. So you're projecting how much money you're going to be making. Now, if you're projecting that you're going to be selling, say, 100 copies of your book in a year, if you're selling it at, say, $15 an hour, and you're selling that 100, here you go, right? It automatically calculated for you. You've earned $1,500. and you're getting that much closer to reaching the minimum amount that you need. Same goes for merchandise, right? So if you built into your budget that you're going to print out, say, patches, and you're selling your patches at $4 each, right? Over the course of the year, if you sell 100 of those, hey, that's another $400, and so on and so on. So, merchandising is a big part of being an artist. Whether that's a literary artist or visual artist, having multiple ways in which you earn money are going to help actually sustain a full career as an artist. Same goes for artist residencies. Some of them are paid. Some of them are just simply giving you a place to work. But if you do get a stipend as being a resident artist for an organization, that's an additional part of your budget that you can include. Same thing with fellowships. A lot of times fellowships are, just money that people give you, and you are responsible for completing your project. Maybe doing some professional development, maybe doing some teaching. Fellowships are definitely a good way to, kind of bring in a little bit of money while also supporting your artistic endeavors. Also grants, right? So local grants from the city, from your local neighborhood council, from the county, those are all definitely on the table for individual artists. Same thing with the state. The California Arts Council does have some grants that they're putting out, especially now, that are for supporting individual artists. So you might as well go for that. Federal grants from the National Endowment of the Arts or from the regional arts providers, WESTAF specifically. They do have some that are for individual artists, depending on the discipline. Translation is one of those that definitely does come to mind. But there's always a project out there that you could probably tack yourself onto with another nonprofit. As part of your income projections, this is also a place where you should be listing the volunteers and also the venues, so workshop spaces that are being offered to you for free. That's also definitely something that you want to say to your funders. This is money that is coming in the form of a donation. So it's a good way to get that kind of leveled out. So yeah. The last thing that's here, if in case you need it, or if you want to create your own separate spreadsheet, most people don't really know too much about formulas and how to create spreadsheet formulas. So I am listing here for you some of the basic ones that are used in this particular spreadsheet. So division, multiplication, addition of separate cells, so cell 1 and cell 3, for example, and then addition of continuous cells. So cell 1 all the way through to cell 5. All of those, you have a separate type of formula that you use there. And then if you want to have, a cell get the same information that's in another cell, you use this last one here. So equals whatever cell number. So that's basically it. Hopefully that's a helpful rundown of your, project budget in the making. Does anyone have any questions for me? Yes, Judy. I see your hand. Do you have a question?
Yeah, my question was would it be a 50-50, like if you're getting your merchandise from someone who does those type of things, like if you're getting it from them, you're paying them, and then you sell your merchandise, would that be a 50-50? Because you guys both win.
Like, let's say it's a bookstore, right, that is selling your book and also selling your tote bags. Bookstores usually have what's called a consignment deal. And when you consign work with someone, they'll usually sell it at whatever price you tell them to sell it, but they'll keep like a 40% and then you keep the other 60%. Now, if you're buying work that's already created by somebody, like let's say you go to Costco, right? You go to Costco and you buy a bunch of sodas. You are paying Costco for the sodas. You then own the sodas and you sell them at whatever amount you want. So that's a separate type of deal. It is kind of everybody wins because Costco gets paid, and then you get paid for whatever you want. But do keep those things in mind, right? They're a different way of making money. Good question. Yeah. Let's see. So Mauricio in the chat asked, does that same go for digital copies of zines? I'm assuming you're talking about sales tax, Mauricio. Is that right? Would you need to add the button maker every year in the budget? The button maker is on there just a one-time thing. Unless if you think you have to replace it every year, then you would probably add that every year. Yeah, so as far as sales tax for digital things, sales tax on digital products, technically you don't have to pay sales tax on that. But if you collect the sales tax on it, you are doing so with the understanding that you're going to then still pay those taxes to your governing body. So, I hope that makes sense. Any other questions?
I have a comment.
Yes.
It's a lot of work, Luis.
I know.
Goodness. How long have you been doing this?
I've been operating DSTL Arts for the past 8 years now.
Wow.
So yeah, it's this is 8 years worth of me putting together budgets.
So basically, writing, publishing, selling would entail taking care of all these financial part that I don't like. That's what it is.
Basically, remember, if you're looking to make a career as an artist, you're actually a business owner, right?
Yeah.
So even if you weren't doing this as an artist, and you were doing it as, like, say, a person that's selling fruit, even a street vendor has all of these same expenses, depending on how big of a business you have. Things might be different from business to business, but for the most part, the process is the same. You have to account for your supplies. You have to account for, the logistical side, right? Your gas, your electricity, your water. If you're marketing and you're, trying to promote your services, those are all still business expenses that you have regardless of what kind of business you're operating. So because we're artists and we're doing artistic projects, it is different, but really not that different. It's just the way in which we make our money is different. And yes, as Mauricio pointed out in the chat, keep all your receipts. Actually, with the IRS, you have to keep your receipts up to 7 years. So, all the stuff from 8 years ago now, DSTL Arts doesn't have to keep anymore, but as a nonprofit, with the state, I have to do it for 10. So that's where the IRS and the state don't match up, but it's really not that big of a deal. Any other questions? No. All right. Looks like I was pretty thorough then. Like I said, this spreadsheet that I shared with you all, you should all be able to have your own copy of it now. So you can just start putting in information as you need. Most of the stuff that's in the annual section, that whole column, you can go ahead and play with those columns. And everything else will calculate for you. When it comes to the project supplies and the project printing costs, just leave that part alone and instead do the itemization. So really be thorough and think about what each item costs and what you're looking to spend. If you need to add cells, because you don't have enough room, just be careful with that. You don't play around too much with the formulas, but that spreadsheet should be more than enough to help you. Just way too much information. Well, yeah. Obviously, if you have questions, I'm available to help. That's what this whole workshop series is for. And even though this is the last session of the current series, we'll be able to talk more, through Google Classroom. I won't be closing down that particular classroom for a little while. And we'll be talking more about this stuff in the coming sessions. So,
is today the last class?
Today is the last class, yes.
And there will be a quiz at the end.
I had no quiz, nothing like that. But even though today's the last class, the zine is, I'm in the middle of making the zine. We'll have the release party on Halloween. So October 31st is when we'll be doing the release party. I'll be sharing more information with you all soon. And also the next series will be starting back up again with the classes on November 10th, if I remember correctly.
Is that a Tuesday too? Tuesdays?
That's a Tuesday, yeah. We're going to keep it on Tuesdays. We're skipping election day. So I want to make sure that everybody does go out and vote. Do not wait for the last minute. But if in case you are one of those people that decides that you have to, still go in person and drop off your ballot, I'd prefer you did that than come to Conchas y Café. So November 3rd, don't forget, it is election day.
No class.
Go out and vote. No class.
Okay.
We'll be starting up again on November 10th instead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need to reapply, or is that?
No, there's no more application. If you applied once for the program, you're basically in it. Yeah.
Right.
Judy, did you have your hand up?
Oh, it's not a question. I just want to share that I have some Brazil cake, so we can celebrate the last class.
She's gonna celebrate. But you're still accessible, right? We can still like if we have a question, I can just on anything. Okay.
Yeah. And whatever questions you might have about this, about the writing, the zines, anything, I'll be available.
Because from what I understand, that what you did was more like you're applying for a grant or something.
Grants, or if you're even fundraising, like say using Patreon or GoFundMe or Kickstarter. All of those things still require you to have a budget. And so this budget is really meant to be your starting point for knowing how much money you need to raise in order to turn a profit ultimately with your project. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well.
Mauricio asked if there's any other software that I recommend aside from Excel. Excel, doing spreadsheets like how I did using Google Sheets are the easy way. And also if you have a Google account, it's free. QuickBooks or that, you do have to pay the subscription. But they are good tools, kind of limited if you're not able to afford the full service. QuickBooks in particular, they have two different types of memberships. The cheapest one is just to keep track of your expenses. The more expensive one helps you create the same kind of budget that I shared with you. So, and as you can see, you can do it easily on Google Sheets or Excel. It's just a couple of different multiplication and division and addition formulas. So as long as you know how to do the formulas, you can definitely create your own spreadsheet or just make a copy of the one that I shared.
Yeah, because you did most of the work. In fact, you did all the work. But you need to plug in the numbers, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you just end up plugging in your numbers,
Yeah. I know I make it sound easy, but I bet you're going to go like, where?
Yeah, I tried to make it as easy as possible. You know, the open spaces are the ones where you can actually put in your information. If there's a number there already, you probably shouldn't put anything there, unless if it's, you know, one of the samples that I put in. Yeah. Yeah, so let's see. Señora Maggie, de nada. What else in the chat here? It's a great tool to have on hand, also just for your own purposes. Yeah, like I was telling little Judy, you know, even if this is something that's going to help you budget for just your everyday life, you know, definitely feel free to use the tool for that, because everybody, I think, can benefit from knowing how much money you're spending on your everyday expenses, and that way you can maybe even save, because it's really, really hard, I think, to save as an artist. I know I have no savings account, and you know, DSTL Arts is able to pay me just enough for me to cover some very basic expenses. But you know, it's little by little. The more you do it, the more you apply to grants, the bigger your grants get. You know, and over time, it's just like putting in your dues, paying your dues. You know, as an artist, you will get to that point where you can actually make a decent living, based on your personal preference for how you want to live. So, yeah. And yeah, I agree with you, Mauricio. It's I think way better to know how to do it yourself. And also, if you have the opportunity to hire someone, you can always say, hey, like, I know what you're doing. If you're screwing me over, I will know. So, you know, it's good to know how to do the work yourself, is all I'm saying. So, yeah. ¿Cuál será el título del zine? Todavía no me decido en el título del zine, pero pronto me voy a decidir. Me han dado unas buenas sugerencias y muchas gracias a todos que han mandado sus ideas. So, yeah. Well, I think, does anybody have any last questions or comments? Judy, did I see your hand go up? No. Okay. Yes.
Just an echo. Where do your taxes go?
Where do your taxes go?
You said let me go inside my room. You said that when you pay food, or I don't know what you said, if you pay all your taxes, like that they charge you, they stay, but like I don't know where they stay.
So there's different types of taxes. Sales taxes are the taxes that you collect when you sell something, and then you pay that money to the government, whether that be the city or the state. So that's money that you are charging people, knowing that you're then going to pay it because you're a business owner. Payroll taxes are the taxes that you pay if you have an employee. And so that's things like Social Security, Medicare, unemployment tax, and workers' compensation. Those taxes are taxes that you pay to the state. Then there's the IRS too. They collect some of those taxes too. All of those taxes, when they take it, you know, the government does basically everything to help us keep our libraries, streets, and everything running. But just like Karen says in the comment, you know, save your receipts, because your receipts are going to help you when it comes time to actually claim your taxes. So every year, the IRS and the state, they ask us to tell them how much money we earned and how much we paid in taxes. As a business owner, if you went out to eat and you were with a client, you know, that money that you spent on the food and on your drinks, that's money that you can say to the IRS, hey, you know, that was part of me conducting my business. And so don't charge me as much on my taxes because I had this business expense.
Oh, okay. So I kind of get it because I see my mama do taxes and things from that accumulate money. They keep for her, I guess. So I guess I know how it works.
Yeah,
Thank
this is a lot of information, obviously, but it's stuff that you'll hopefully learn soon. And if not, you always have us here. So,
Thank you.
cool.
Thank you, maestro. Buenas noches a todos.
Buenas noches.
Tengo sí una pregunta.
Ujú.
Hoy me está diciendo Yuri que hoy es la última clase.
Ujú.
¿Regresamos en 2 semanas o hasta cuándo?
Esta es la última clase de la serie y vamos a tener la presentación del Zine el 31 de octubre. Y luego de aquí empieza la nueva serie de clases el 10 de noviembre.
Okay.
Vamos a tener unas cuantas semanas como de vacaciones, hay que decir.
Ok, y estoy viendo que se está grabando, entonces puedo revisar, ver la clase adelante yo otra vez.
Sí.
Ok, porque me interesó eso de hacer, que puede uno hacer mascarillas o bolsas o stickers, todo eso.
Ujú. Sí, todo eso es como otra manera para ganar ingresos, pero obviamente también tenemos que tomar en cuenta lo que cuesta.
Ok.
Y luego cobrar con el precio apropiado.
Y mi última pregunta es, escuché que, ay, ya se me fue la onda, como venía Yuri para acá con el celular. Ya se me voy a acordar si tenemos 2-3 minutos más ahorita, recuerdo. No es lo mismo Wonder Woman que 50 años después.
No hay problema.
Okay.
Yeah. So, any last questions? No? Okay. Bueno, pues yo sí, las mamás son las Wonder Woman. So yeah, that's it. Don't have any more information to share with you guys. Ya sabrán pronto la hora en que tendremos la presentación y la lectura. Pero sí tienen ya la fecha lista, el día de Halloween. So I'll be sharing with you all the information for signing up for the reading, which will be through Eventbrite, so we can register people. And yeah, that'll be it for now. So, sí, Judith.
Me acordé de mi pregunta. Escuché que dijo en la clase pasada que el libro iba a ser digital. ¿En algún momento dado lo vamos a poder imprimir?
No, va a ser, yo les voy a mandar una copia digital y también la copia física. O sea, va a ser imprimido también.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Porque ya tengo varios clientes. Ay, sí. No, quiero regalárselo a la directora que me dio el trabajo, al abogado que me ayudó al trabajo, y obviamente a mi mami y todo eso. Entonces voy a incluirlos en mi lista para comprarlos.
Perfecto.
Gracias. Saludos a todos. Me gusta verles las caritas.
Igual. Y si quieren comprar más copias, ya cuando los tenga, los van a poder comprar por medio de la página de red de DSTL Arts. So, dstilarts.org/shop. Ahí es a donde existen todas las copias del pasado y las ediciones pasadas, y ahí pueden comprar la cantidad que quieran. So, yeah. Así que con esa me despido. Que pasen un buen resto de su semana y aquí los veré muy pronto. Have a good night, everybody. Take care. Bye.